Now, curiosity is incredibly important because curiosity is the true nature of consciousness and who we really are, true nature of source.
Okay.
What is possible here? What could happen next?
Hmm.
Instead of trying to preempt the experience, you're open to being the observer of life. And the other important thing is spontaneous action. Spontaneity, again, is a hallmark of source, of who we really are. Because as we know, creation and life happens in a moment. It happens instantly. It can't really be controlled or predicted. And I think the more spontaneous we can be in everyday life, we are allowing ourselves to live more from cosmic mind or source.
Hi, I'm Scott Ware, the publisher and editor of Radiance magazine, which can be found at radiancemm.com for Radiance Multidimensional Media. And this is Interviews on Xpnsion Network. And I have with me author, speaker, Rebecca Dawson. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Great to have you. And you have written a book that has just a captivating topic. It's called The Agreement. I'm going to read a little bit more here. Humanity's shift to a multidimensional experience is upon us. Are we ready? What does it mean for us individually and collectively? How can we be present and powerful in this transition? How can we create our new reality, finding our true freedom in living from the cosmic mind? You've got a lot on your mind, Rebecca.
Well, there's a lot available in the cosmic mind. That's for sure.
And you're tapping in. And all right, so what would you say your book is about? What have you tapped into for us?
Well, this book really is an approach and a philosophy to living life in a very natural way. I think that as humans, we have learnt how to value ourselves and measure ourselves in terms of our relation to ourselves and our exterior reality. And really, the agreement talks about how we can move back into a more powerful sense of being so that we can actually begin to create a new reality with new things, new experiences.
And some would say by force or by flow that we're going to have to do it regardless.
Well, I think the paradigm shift for humanity is happening. This is a question here of how much joy and ease and interest and discovery can we give ourselves permission to have with it rather than resistance. Because if we understand that the mechanics for reality are changing as we go through this 3D to 5D shift, if we don't know what the mechanics for movement and creation are, we keep doing things in the same way and we get frustrated and we start to feel that we're regressing or don't have a sense of identity or success anymore. So it's wonderful to understand how it's now working differently so that we can start to move into more comfort and joyful experience with that and begin to experiment a little bit more.
So maybe we should distinguish the difference between 3D and 5D. How would you do that?
Well, I think the very basic foundation for third dimensional reality is based on two main things. First of all, a premise of cause and effect. And that lends to purpose and intention and all of those things. And it also depends greatly on an idea of however much focus and energy you put into something, it's going to determine the effect. So like pushing a ball across a room or up a hill, you have to donate energy to that ball and transfer it for anything to happen. Right. And there is a transference of energy that happens that's directly related to effort and focus. And you can only move sequentially in third dimensional reality. The other thing about third dimensional reality is everything moves in cycles. It's like a circle rolling along the road. We tend to get the same experiences over and over again. We tend to attract the same people into our lives. We tend to even in terms of genetic inheritance with experience and emotions and blueprints, humanity has been in this cycle for around 300,000 years. So we've been in this for a long, long time. And it's very difficult to create anything new because everything in third dimensional reality is based upon attention to detail, but repetition of that detail. And we see that in all of our external structures. We see it in our workplaces and our education systems and the economy and everything that's based on productivity and consistency. And yet, as humans, we're not really designed for that. So when we move into 5D, let's look at that circle becoming a sphere. So now, instead of just moving in one direction and putting exertion of effort, we start to be able to manifest and move our focus in multiple directions. If you think about being at the center of a sphere and moving out into all directions, we can do more and we can move our focus very quickly. But also, we're not based on a cycle anymore. The movement for energy in 5D is based on a pulse. And so we start to have days or moments where there is a real desire to engage or create, and then moments where there isn't. And that's how our vitality and energy is moving at this time, more pulse-like. So there are moments of bursts of inspiration and then moments of nothingness.
Sure, I love that. And you know, I asked that question thinking most people watching the show are going to know the difference, but I still like hearing different people's definitions. And you actually expanded my definition with what you shared, because you talk about just being a circle on a flat, say a flat surface going into a sphere. That is a big difference. And I know that when we're, for instance, solving a problem in 3D, it'll be, we're going to go back into our past and our memory. What worked before? Let me make that try and work again. Let me do X, Y, Z. And that's very mental. But I know when I go into my heart, which is largely 5D territory as well, all of a sudden I'm creative, I'm expansive, there's no limits. And that reminds me of the difference between going from a flat surface to a sphere, because all of a sudden I can make connections I didn't make before. Does that gel with your definition?
Absolutely. And the main difference there is you're actually creating newness instead of a permutation of what's already existed. And I mean, really, the Earth is designed to be this galactic Garden of Eden, where humanity is this creative species that gets to create all these amazing things, but we've been stuck on this repeat cycle for so long.
Yeah.
So, you know, new Earth reality, how do we create a new Earth unless we're really creating out of the cycle of repetition? How do you bring something new into the world? It's an incredible time. But one of the most important things about this is that we have to be willing to step into the unknown. Because if we know what we want to create and we think we know what we want for our future, that almost inevitably is based on a concept or an idea that we already have.
Exactly. So stepping into the unknown, into working with ideas we didn't have before, starting a sentence and not knowing how you're going to finish it and just trusting that the words will come when you're operating from that space. Is that close?
Absolutely. I think that's a great example. And I think, you know, even lending towards the concept of channeling, a lot of people don't really understand what that is. It's not necessarily bringing something outside of yourself in, it's stepping into the unknown and allowing something new to come out.
Okay, I like that. That's an expanded definition of channeling. I enjoy that. I mean, I know everybody channels. I know I'm channeling when I'm cooking sometimes, when I go into a thoughtlessness or a space of no thought, and I'm creating, not necessarily from the past. Maybe that's the same as Zen, when they talk about Zen and the art of archery, that you've done all the practice, you've done everything, but when it comes time to actually let the arrow go, you go into mindlessness and you don't even realize you've released it. Or maybe that's 4D. I don't know.
No, I would agree with you. I think in many ways it's a disarming of the mind or a repositioning of the mind. We tend to think of the mind as the one that's sitting behind the arrow. The mind is the archer and directing it, rather than seeing the mind, or even the ego indeed, as the actual arrowhead itself. That actually, I like to think of it like a fountain pen. And the pen hits the paper, it needs a certain amount of pressure, and then the ink flows, you know, consciousness and the cosmic mind flows.
Oh, yes. That's a good
So,
one.
so the mind's not the hand directing it. It's the point of impact. It's the interface
I like that.
between who we really are and this reality we find ourselves in.
Are there people or other symptoms we should be aware of if we're sitting there in 3D on a flat surface, but there's something pulling at us that we want to go to be that creative, but we resist because it's unfamiliar? What do you recommend people, what do you recommend they look for? What do you recommend they do to
Well,
break on through to the other side?
I think there's two main things that are the keys for that to step into creative flow, creative
Mm,
action. And those two things are curiosity and spontaneity.
mm,
And they are two things that actually most of our systems and most of our daily lives don't make way for. We're encouraged to plan and be strategic and think ahead. Now, curiosity is incredibly important because curiosity is the true nature of consciousness and who we really are, true nature of source. What
okay.
is possible here? What could happen next?
Mm,
Instead of trying to preempt the experience, you're open to being the observer of life. And the other important thing is spontaneous action. Spontaneity, again, is a hallmark of source, of who we really are. Because as we know, creation and life happens in a moment.
yes.
It happens instantly. It can't really be controlled or predicted. And I think the more spontaneous we can be in everyday life, we are allowing ourselves to live more from cosmic mind or source. And it could be something really simple. Sometimes people think, well, spontaneous action is huge. It's like suddenly deciding to fly to another country or suddenly deciding to leave your partner or whatever it is.
Right.
But spontaneous action can be something really simple, like instead of picking up your coffee mug with your right hand, pick it up with your left hand. Put one shoe on first instead of the other and see what that feels like. It's a completely different energy.
So spontaneity is sort of like saying following your intuition.
It's almost unlocking yourself from automated action and life and bringing you back into alignment with who you really are. So you start operating from that.
I agree. I love that. And then, yeah, brushing your teeth with your other hand instead sets off different things. I mean, Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about that sort of thing to change it up so that, because if you want a different life and you don't change anything, you're going to keep getting the same life. So if you want transformation, do different things. Literally, like you're saying, do those things. For me, going out into nature, I just does it all. I mean, it just wipes the slate clean, and staying out there, because then there's no rules. It's
Right.
it's not practical or logical to be in nature for an amount of time, right? It's just you're there and it's soothing and it speaks to your soul. So that would be something that I think could wipe the slate and reset.
Agreed, because when you're spontaneous,
Mm,
you're available, you're present.
yeah, that's
You're
right.
not in automation. Suddenly you're there in the moment. Oh, this is different. What's happening now? And that's when things start flowing. That's when the ink starts coming through the pen and starts writing new things into our reality.
So is your book the agreement about, hey, why don't we all agree that these things we're talking about are the new virtues, and that why don't we all agree to live this way so that we can have a better earth? Is that it?
Well, a really agreement is a view of resonance, because when we were talking before about 3D with cause and effect, we
Mm,
predict and then we move towards an outcome. When we move into 5D and indeed multidimensionality, creation happens through resonance, not through expended energy and effort, which means that life becomes an amplification of you rather than you trying to get life to line up for you, which can take an awful lot of effort. So the agreement in itself is the mechanism of reference and resonance, so that when you are sitting in this source-like state and available, things start showing up for you that are in complete resonance with that.
right.
And that's how we create more instantly. That's how we create a new planet. That's how we create new realities and new communities and new relationships. So it's less about trying to get things to adjust, because we spent an awful lot of time in our lives trying to get things to fit and adjust, or indeed try to adjust or fit ourselves into what's available. And it becomes more about moving into an agreement state or a state of resonance. It's much more efficient.
Okay, well, yeah, and this information that is in the book, it says here, so this isn't speculation, it's the information provided directly to you by the masters, aspects of source that are committed to helping mankind prepare for the shift to a multidimensional reality that is already unfolding. How long have you been in communication with these masters, and how does that work?
For about 25 years. So I've been doing this for a really long time. I started really young. I was 17, 18 when I first started channeling. Wasn't part of my plan. I don't think anyone plans to be a channeler.
Oh, right.
It can be a little bit disruptive.
Not after incarnation, but pre-carnation.
Maybe, yeah. So so my concept at that time of what channeling was quite different. And I think we touched on that earlier, that, you know, my experience and my understanding of framework at that time was, it's, you know, these beings that are wiser and have a higher vibration that come in and speak through me. And I am a voice channel. So, you know, my voice changes and my face changes, and I take on a different persona when that happens. But over the years, and with everything that, you know, we've been learning and the information that's been coming through, my understanding has shifted now to a more multidimensional view. So now I see these aspects of source known as the masters that can be identifiable as such, that actually arise from me when I move into that state of oneness. Because when we move into that availability for life, everything's available. Everything's available in the one place. We're so, I wouldn't even say connected. I would say we're all one.
Yes.
And every human has the capacity to dip into an infinite amount of wisdom. Right. And infinite timelines, infinite life stories. So that's how I experience it now, which is why channeling for me now is so seamless, and it's not a disruptive experience.
For other people who want to do that, would you recommend, what would you recommend they need to surrender in order to do that?
I would say, again, it is really about knowing that it's your right to have access to everything. I think that's a big thing, that it's your birthright and it's your natural state, particularly, you know, when there are ideas, some very traditional ideas about earning your way there. That was certainly very present for me when I started channeling. You're too young, you don't have enough experience, who do you think you are? You haven't earned your way there through the hierarchies or initiations or whatever. So I think for everybody to know that it's your natural state, it's your right to access that wisdom within. I think that's the biggest hurdle. It's the permission.
I agree. That makes sense. How much does the heart play into all of this?
Well, I mean, are you looking at heart as a separate aspect? Because I tend to think when I move into that state that everything just blends into one energy and one light. But it's interesting that you bring up the heart. I actually experienced a heart attack about 3 weeks ago. So I just come out of hospital and am recovering. And a lot of people would suppose that having a heart attack would mean that there's some kind of blockage going on in your heart. And yet the masters have talked about heart attacks before. I think they mentioned it first time for me about 10 years ago. So they must have known that it was going to be part of my experience. And really, the way they described that was a spontaneous opening. And you either are complete in that moment and move into another experience through a physical death, or you use that experience to then start to express in a even more expanded and open way. So I feel very blessed to have had that experience, but of course the heart is so important, because the more open it is, the more ability we have to express what's within.
So I haven't told anybody this, But a few weeks ago, I had a heart situation. I went to the hospital and there was nothing wrong with my heart, but I was feeling like there was.
Right.
And you know, I have a very wise girlfriend, and she suggested, yeah, it was energetic and part of the process because we do a lot of work. So
Yeah, absolutely. An
yeah,
interesting thing was that I had just done a session and a video that I put out the morning that I had my experience, that was talking about the changeover from the linear electrical grids of operation and energy, and also within the body, to a return to a magnetic core energy, and that this was going to affect people's heart spaces. So people were going to be having palpitations and some disruptions in the heart when this happened. So I guess you and I both experienced that as well.
and it's no joke. If we go to the emergency, it was not a
Yeah.
minor thing.
Oh, I had a pretty major heart attack. So yeah,
Yeah.
but still here. And
I,
interestingly enough, there were no blockages or anything. They were scratching their heads about what actually caused it.
Same here. Yeah. So okay. I'm going to talk about returning to sovereignty. You and I chatted a little bit before the interview, and you mentioned that phrase. Um, it had to do with the subject of the importance of serving ourselves. Because if we are all one, when we serve ourselves, we're serving everyone.
Yes.
Can you explain your take on that?
Well, I mean, I agree with you. I think the issue for humanity has become a sense of desired salvation. And I think when we have desired salvation, we think that there's a certain requirement for service. Now, I think it's one thing to naturally be compassionate and naturally share your view and share your
Absolutely.
experience with others. I think it's another thing altogether to put others before self and sacrifice your own self for others in the hope of salvation. I think there's an awful lot of philosophy and conditioning around this on our planet, and I don't think that it serves us to be in our greatest capacity.
I'm just going to say it. Our parents did it. They taught us this. Just going to call them out, and in with the best of intentions. And but yeah, they say if you do this, I'll love. You know, they didn't say it like this. I'll love you more, but not that they would say their love was conditional. But yeah, there was that in school. We were taught if you do this, you're a good little boy, you're a good little girl.
Of course.
But
In church?
we're over that in church. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, I think that's part of this system we've been in for so many thousands and thousands of years, that really every time I think we really get close to embodying the totality of who we are, we're encouraged to give something away. And I
Right.
think that, you know, even in terms of what we do, Scott, I'm sure you must have encountered this over the years, that if you work in any kind of, or engage in any kind of spiritual activity, or are positioned to be in that spiritual realm, people expect you to be more self-sacrificing than most people, and can be very disrupted if you actually do not fit into that framework.
Right. If we're not living like a monk, donating everything and living on the street. Yeah, exactly. In their vision of saintliness.
Of course, because that's always been centered around a sense of sacrifice. And I mean, I think we see that in a lot of spiritual dogma, you know, the ultimate sacrifice. And I think we do that with our bodies. I think we do that with our emotions. I think we do it in relationships. And it really does, I think, prevent us from stepping into our greatness.
So being judgmental, that's a big part of it, right? Because we're
Yeah, I
really
mean,
judging ourselves.
of course, of course. And I think that's very typical of 3D reality, because we don't just observe things, we assess them.
Yes, yes. Yeah, we don't, yeah, I mean, to look at things with love, I mean, to look like how a grandparent would look at a grandchild, or, you know, anyone we love, and that person can do no wrong. If we could look at everyone like that, that's an agreement I could get behind.
It is. And it's also an agreement for ourselves. We don't look at ourselves like that.
There
But,
you go.
3D reality, I mean, all of our external systems and what we're taught to think and believe and how to operate, it's all based on solving a problem. And that's what the mind's become. It's become a problem solver. So every time we look at something, we think, how can that be improved? How can it be changed? And of course, it's the same with ourselves. I mean, how many people are on a spiritual journey, so to speak, and that's 3D in itself, for improvement?
Isn't it interesting? So describe why a spiritual journey is 3D and how it maybe is best served in 5D.
And this is disruptive for a lot of people too. But really, I think the shift for humanity is coming to the end of the journey, the end of the spiritual journey, which is linear. It requires a lot of effort and focus. There's a sense that you could regress in some way or go off the path. And essentially, it really takes you away from yourself, in my view. And look, I'm a person that's been on that spiritual journey for many, many years. You start off whole. And then there's this concept that you have to move towards a better version of yourself or a fuller version of yourself. And perhaps this is very, elementary in the way I'm describing it. But in essence, what happens is we go on this journey away from ourselves to try to come back to ourselves, except we keep moving in one direction.
Well, and there's that famous poem, and then we shall know ourselves for the first time once we've completed that, which is what they say about the hero's journey. And I've had discussions with a friend that that person doesn't believe the spiritual journey is applicable anymore, that it's part of the old paradigm. What do you think about the dark night
I
of the soul?
agree. I
Yeah.
agree 100%. And I think that, when you look at the spiritual journey, it's a very, very crowded path. There's a lot of people on it. And we're trying to get away or to somewhere else, and we don't really know where we're trying to go. And I think really our opportunity now is to be pioneers in this earth and to actually get off the path. And when you get off the path, what's next to the path? You've got muddy fields on either side, and people on the path are saying, what are you doing? Where are you going? And you're actually going out into fertile land, and that's where all the seeds are, and that's where all the potential growth is. But you have to be pretty courageous and bold to do that, because there's no path set up. It's where you go that creates those new pathways for others. And I think that's where we have to be willing to be right now, is to be a little bit bold. And I don't know about you, Scott, but the most profound experiences of consciousness that I've had in my life, I've had when I've actually given up.
Well, and you talked about the heart not being separate. 3D and 5D are separate, and I've always seen the brain and the heart as synonymous. And it's been helpful to me to go, okay, get out of the head, get into your heart. Do you see any validity with that, or you just still see it all as one?
Look, I do see validity with that, because I think that, there's this term ascension
Yes.
that everybody loves to use. And ascension, even when you sit in meditation or you think about your spiritual path, it's all about coming up and out and maybe somewhere else. It's again, moving away from yourself. And so in a lot of the seminars we do, we talk about descension, which can be pretty disruptive, but in essence, it's bringing more of yourself to this. And I think that if we talk about descension, it's like getting from the mind back into this cosmic mind, which sits, in my view, between the navel and the heart. And that's where our intelligence and wisdom center is, and the doorway to everything. And in that way, that becomes the operating system, and then the mind can deliver that as the interface into our reality. The mind repositions itself as a tool for translation.
Okay. In the holidays, which depending on when people are viewing this, we're in the bottom of 2020 here. I've always loved them because people seem to have their hearts open. There's just more, more than camaraderie. There's more compassion. There's more love, and you feel it. And then the holidays are over, and that tends to be over. People get back into the grind. I don't know how it's going to be in quarantine, with quarantine coming in and out. But isn't that where people are opening their hearts, and we can actually experience that at that time of year more than any other?
Look, I think so. I think it's a great opportunity to feel compassion for others, but I think the ultimate compassion is compassion for ourselves. And I think that's the bit we forget about.
I was going to say we need a day for that, a national, an international, but we need every day to be that.
Yeah. But isn't it interesting how when we think about compassion, we automatically think about for others?
Yes, you got me.
Yeah, but it's interesting, right? And I think too,
It
you know,
is.
even you going through your heart experience recently,
Yes.
an opportunity for you to actually just be with yourself for a bit, because we forget. We become so focused on the external reality. We so forget that we're the center of our reality.
So true. So true.
Yeah.
Where can people get this book, The Agreement?
So you can find it through my website, RebeccaDawson.net, or through Amazon. And I've got lots of free resources actually, and lots of channelings and videos and things on that website that you can access if you're interested in hearing more.
Okay, so that's at RebeccaDawson.net.
Yes.
And I understand you're an Australian. You come to California occasionally for classes and such?
I do. I'm usually there every year in the summer. So yeah, obviously I'm not there this year, but I do quite a lot of events and things around the United States and other countries as well. So you can always find out where I am by looking on the website.
What would you like to say in closing about what people can do to just be open to this experience and open to expansion, maybe even open to awakening? If someone's watching this by this point and they are so-called not awakened, I would say they are by now through this interview, but what would you say to them? What hints or help would you give them?
At this time, I think a really important question to be asking is, what else? And although we're taught to be very content and in gratitude with what is, this is really a bridge into a new reality now. And it's a good time to be asking, what else? What else is there? Because when we ask what else, we open up the door to something new happening. And this isn't a time for correcting what's happened or correcting what has happened. It's a time, it's an opening to introduce something new into our world, new ways of doing things. So when we ask the question, we invite that possibility in. And I think that's a really important thing right now.
That's very beautifully said. Thank you for doing this interview, Rebecca. It's been delightful.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Me too. And thank you all for watching. I'm Scott Ware with Radiance Magazine, and this is the Xpnsion Network Interviews. Thank you. Bye-bye.